distributed ledger technology. We believe that distributed ledger technology reduces cost and time to market while increasing the speed of business. Hence, our company was founded with this belief in around September of 2014. We held our first roundtable in New York, attended by 8 banks looking to understand blockchain. A little bit of time goes by, and we end up with a partnership of 9 banks that design and deliver advanced distributed ledger technologies to global financial markets. A little bit more time goes by, and we build a consortium of banks that grows to about 42 members. Another year or so roughly goes by, and we create our first general availability release of Corda open source, which is pretty fantastic, and that was a great addition to our architecture working group that we were building with these other institutions to come up with an enterprise grade blockchain architecture that we've been developing over quite a while now. So a little bit more time goes by, and we end up at July 2018, where we published Corda Enterprise 3.0, which was our first 100% compatible release with Corda open source, kind of moving towards that open core model that you see with a lot of similar kinds of businesses. And by August of 2018, our ecosystem had grown to about 200 financial institutions, regulators, trade associations, and professional services firms and tech companies. Probably worth mentioning as well that myself and Peter are based out of New York, and we have offices in the UK, in Mumbai, and other parts around the world. You can find our employees in a lot of different places. So wherever you are, you can probably find us. That being said, we now have an ecosystem of about 350 plus companies across industry. We kind of recreated a lot of the existing business networks with banks, single member enterprises, corporates. We have the ability to kind of grow your network now by joining different Corda networks that are out there in order to participate in transactions with some of these entities. We offer some fantastic delivery partners to collaborate with when it comes to taking your actual CorDaps that you build using Corda into production. And of course, we have some integrations and some partnerships we built with all of the big infrastructure providers, such as AWS, Hewlett-Packard, Intel, Microsoft, Azure, Oracle, etc. So if you have questions about some of those specific partnerships and some guides for deployment on some of those cloud providers, you can definitely ask us after, and I can get you some links to those. So where are we going with this? The blockchain 1.0, 2.0 philosophy of looking at decentralized ledger technology, we have found was a little bit lacking. It lacked robust identity features, it certainly lacked speed, it lacked real privacy, and it lacked meaningful integration with other services within the kinds of networks that we were trying to serve, especially in the enterprise. So we ended up developing what we like to call the 3rd generation blockchain, Corda. We like to call it the blockchain for business. It's applicable to all industries. It's the only blockchain built specifically for businesses that offers privacy, scalability, and interoperability from the start and the ground up. It was designed to meet the standards of one of the most complex and highly regulated industries, and it can be applied seamlessly to any other area of commerce that you can imagine. And of course, we have a cross-industry ecosystem like I was talking about earlier. We now have the best opportunity to leverage a large network with blockchain in order to get the most value out of this kind of a platform. We have a thriving network, like I said, of over 300 companies that we work with embracing this technology to solve real world problems. And of course, Corda is open source, like I mentioned earlier. So you can go and take a look at our project yourself, improve the code, inspect the code, and make all kinds of recommendations for how you think it should work. And that's another reason you should reach out to us on our Slack. That being said, Corda at its base does offer the features I kind of talked about earlier. We have strong identity, we have performance and scalability, privacy baked in, global interoperability, consensus, and we have an open source network. So, what exactly do I mean when I say Corda? The short answer is that it's a permissioned network that provides peer-to-peer communication on a need-to-know basis, which is a bit of a different paradigm than maybe some of the transaction models you've heard of before, where a single transaction is broadcast to all of the nodes on a network. In this case, we create a private network where different entities can host their own Corda nodes, that are responsible for signing off on the transactions they approve of explicitly, and only the transactions I quote unquote need to know about are the ones that I will ever be able to see or observe. So in this model we've got here, we have three different technology providers: the Colorado River Authority, Bayes, TransCorp, and Titan Technology Partners. You can see each of them has an address. This is just their public IP address and the port on which their CORDA node is taking traffic. Then a public key. And so each of them has their own unique key pairs. And then there is a pool or a single notary running as a separate CORDA node that validates these transactions as they happen. So let's say Titan Technology Partners wants to issue a loan, we'll call it, to Colorado River Authority. Titan Technology can do that, create a transaction, creating an IOU, let's call it, to the Colorado River Authority. The Colorado River Authority can then sign off on that transaction, and then it can be sent to a notary to validate. And so a trusted party can run the notary, or you can maintain it yourself, depending on your use case and how you're manipulating your CORDA network. You can create notaries that validate the transactions along with the two of you. So in order for a transaction to happen, not only does the notary have to approve of this transaction, and you create all kinds of configurable validation on that, but Titan Technology has to approve it, Colorado River has to approve of it, and then the notary has to approve of it, at which point that transaction becomes secure and immutable. It cannot be edited after the fact unless it is through a new transaction. And it is completely secure, it is unchangeable, backed by cryptography, all of the things you'd normally expect to hear about when you're using a blockchain-based data store. It is very flexible to use CORDA for all kinds of use cases, and we see that all the time. So hopefully that gives you at least a basic idea to get ourselves started. I do want to ask if you all have any questions, and so I will check the chat real quick and see if anyone's posted. Oh, sweet. So a lot of people just here to learn. That's great to hear. Deepak, I hope the sound gets a little bit better. Sorry to hear that. Glad to hear other people can hear me, though, and nothing crazy has gone wrong. And professional reasons, that's great to hear, Marius. That's awesome. If anyone has any questions, like I said, feel free to post them. I'll give it another second. I think there might be a maybe 20-second delay between me saying these things and you all hearing them on your own computers. It's actually interesting. We were just talking to a company today that plans on maintaining a separate CORDA network entirely for their customers. And so they will be provisioning actually CORDA accounts, which will be existing in one single CORDA node for each of their customers. The CORDA accounts SDK lets you create multiple logical sub-vaults where you can create transactions between the accounts on singular nodes, which can obviously be a huge cost save as you start to run nodes further down the road. So I'm going to jump back into the slides then. If I missed anything, Peter hopefully can catch my back, but or at least if I miss anything as I'm going, I should say, Peter can hopefully catch my back. So what I want to emphasize here is that the idea is actually that you are not a single CORDA node or network by your organization on your own. The real value starts to come in when you actually participate in a network of CORDA nodes, right? So in the ideal scenario, there's actually many CORDA nodes by other organizations that you can interact with, and notaries mediating those transactions between all of you. I would recommend taking a look at the CORDA Network Foundation, for example, to take a look at how that might really relate to this example as an analog. And so you can see that this example we illustrated earlier of our own notary pool with Colorado River, Bayes, TransCorp, and Titan Technology Partners exists as a subnet within a larger network of CORDA nodes between lots of different participating entities across multiple industries. This is where things get really powerful. And of course, we have an identity manager, we like to call it the doorman, and a network map that ensures the discoverability between all of the different nodes on the network and enables consistency as far as identities are concerned. You could almost think of it like a phone book available to every CORDA node. So Corda nodes are nice because they abstract away a lot of the complexity of updating the ledger, and of course even more of the complexity of maintaining a blockchain yourself. So the node abstracts away all of the basic problems you'd run into with messaging, concurrency, storage, disaster recovery, peer discovery, key management, data distribution. These are a lot of the problems you're probably going to run into very quickly if you're trying to maintain a blockchain on your own. So we have this really wonderful set of abstractions called flows, which run on Corda nodes that create ledger updates. Those ledger updates you can also think of as transactions. So I can run a flow on a Corda node, and that flow can identify what kind of transaction that I want to create, and you will code that. You will write the code for that flow. So I can specify the kinds of transactions I want to create, build them in flows using Java or Kotlin, and then run them on specific Corda nodes. So for some examples, right, you can have something called a token issuance flow, a create mortgage flow, a crowdfunding flow, etc. These run on your Corda node, and if the flows are successful, meaning they are validated by both the originating party and the other parties that need to know about it, then if the notary validates that transaction as well, it is considered valid. The transaction is created, broadcast to all the relevant parties and none of the irrelevant parties, and the transaction is signed and considered valid. And that is now the new immutable source of truth for the state of those objects that you were representing. So, CorDaps. We talked a little bit about them within the context of flows. So, what are CorDaps, right? The first thing that we want to understand is that a CorDap is a Corda Decentralized Application. Maybe that wasn't too surprising, that acronym. So a decentralized application, a computer application that runs on a distributed computing system. It's also sometimes referred to as a smart contract, and we'll get into that in a little bit. So CorDaps are just these simple binary jars that are stored inside of Corda nodes. Each node can carry multiple CorDaps. It is literally a jar file that is copied into a specific folder on the node running Corda. No magic happening there. You can install CorDaps relatively easily on your machines. So you can see here we have some examples: a Hello World CorDapp, a whistleblowing CorDapp, etc. In a real life example, you could have, say, a supply chain app running on your node, and you could have an insurance app running on your node at the same time. They're just